Welcome everybody to Hadassah's Summer Book Reviews. It's great to see everybody today on the second installment of our always wonderful book reviews. Before we get started, we do have an announcement from Sandra Resnikoff, and I'm going to ask her to unmute and just share some information with us. We missed you last week. We're glad you're here this week.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to just show the certificates that we have. These are $5 each. These are in memory of someone. And you could have them, of course, at your home. And the Chagall windows are on the side. It's 6 of them are on the side. And here's another one that is also $5 each. And I wanted to show you the certificates we have that are $10 each. This one is in memory with the Hadassah on the top, and then in memory of. And then this one, which is similar, but it's in honor of. And these are $10 each. And if you call me, I would gladly make arrangements with you to deliver them, or you can come pick them up. So with that little info, I wanted to have an endorsement from a satisfied customer who is very happy with her purchases of these certificates.
Well, Sandra, that would be me. In fact, I did just purchase a couple of certificates yesterday, and I really do enjoy sending them every once in a while. That is really the best gift and more meaningful gift for me. But remember, Sandra has cards and certificates. And as we mentioned last week, were we meeting in person, she would have her table out with everything on there. But since we're not, please remember to give her a call and go see and pick up cards and certificates. And I will be putting in her phone number in the chat box so everybody will have that handy. So because of Zoom, we can't meet in person and sell cards, but because of Zoom, we can have one person do the interviewing today from Vienna, Virginia, and one person do the book review today from St. Petersburg, Florida. So aren't we lucky? So I am going to turn everything over first to you, Beth, and make sure everybody is muted, and you'll get a better view if you put it on speaker view. And we're ready to go.
Well, I am delighted to have been asked to introduce this month's book reviewer. But before we begin, I'm going to give you a Hadassah moment. There's so much about Hadassah to love that it's hard to know what to choose. To be honest, however, what has always appealed to me most about Hadassah is its educational opportunities. Excuse me. Okay. Here is a sampling of some of the programs, podcasts, and courses that Hadassah has created that caught my eye. Medical marijuana, highs and lows, smoke and mirrors. Treasure of the Hadassah archives. Israeli-inspired cooking demos. How genealogy became the great Jewish pastime, dance fitness, transgender youth, and conversion. But I would like to highlight one of the most significant contributions that Hadassah has made in the education world. Its crucial support of the Never Again Education Act. Because of Hadassah's involvement, this vitally important act was passed in May of 2020. The Never Again Education Act requires that the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum develop and nationally disseminate accurate, relevant, and accessible resources to improve awareness and understanding of the Holocaust. It also authorizes various Holocaust education program activities to engage prospective and current teachers and educational leaders. The passage of the Never Again Education Act has brought America closer than ever to ensuring we will never forget the tragedy of the Holocaust. It ensures that students will learn its universal lessons of tolerance and that educators will be better prepared to teach this absolutely critical matter accurately and confidently. Hadassah has been a leader in the Never Again Education Act, educating our communities, mobilizing grassroots advocates across the country, and securing key legislative support. This progress would not have been possible without the commitment of Hadassah members and our growing stature in Washington. Now, pleased to introduce our speaker. Jill Weisberg has a rich and varied background, both in her education and her work experiences. She attended several colleges and universities, including Lebanon Valley College, the University of North Colorado, and Franklin University in Ohio. She received degrees in English and secondary education. She has a teaching certificate as well as an MBA. Jill has taught in junior high, high school, and junior college. She also has taught GED classes in English and social studies. Jill has also owned a Merle Norman cosmetic studio for 10 years and sold it before she moved. So no discounts, ladies. In addition to teaching and owning a business, Jill worked for many years for State Farm Insurance. Her last position, which ended in October of 2018, was as president of Jewish Family Service of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a non-sectarian agency founded in 1989. Jill served as the president of her synagogue sisterhood for 3 years, as well as financial secretary up until the time she and her husband moved. On a personal note, Jill and I discovered that we both have lived in Lancaster and even had the shared experience of volunteering to give tours in period costume of Wheatland, the home of President James Buchanan. Jill and her husband, Joel, moved to St. Petersburg, Florida in October 2018. They have recently adopted a rescue dog named Ricky, who is bringing them a great deal of joy. Jill has been a member of Hadassah for nearly 3 years and apparently is now president of St. Petersburg. I love it. And we are delighted that she has agreed to be part of Hadassah's summer book review program. I am now pleased to introduce Jill Weisberg to talk about The World That We Knew by Alice Hoffman.
Thanks, Beth. That was so nice. And Beth and I also share an old friend from a long time ago. So we realized that a couple days ago, and we both got married in Lancaster at different times, but you know, we both got married
in different synagogues.
Different synagogues. It's just really neat.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen. There, give me a second. Here we go. Share. There we go. I'm going to be talking today about this incredibly wonderful book, The World That We Knew by Alice Hoffman. Oh, what a book this is. Hoffman's exploration of the world of good and evil and the constant contest between them is unflinching, and the humanity she brings to us. It is a glorious experience. The book builds and builds as she weaves together seamlessly the stories of people in the most desperate of circumstances, and then it delivers with a tremendous punch. It opens up the world, the universe, in a way that is absolutely unique. By the end, you may be weeping. And this is a review by Elizabeth Strout. So I'm showing you, this is a cover, but there are 2 covers. I just thought this was so interesting. And I know somebody had read it before, and I can't remember your name, but I know your face. So, it's interesting that this is a second cover. The first cover, both of the covers are main characters of the story. And yes, the heron is a main character, a very, very important one. And let's see, oops. In 1971, I was a sophomore in college at Lebanon Valley College, and very much in love with the Romantic period literature. I was particularly imbued with the phrase, the willing suspension of disbelief. This was a term created by Samuel Coleridge, introduced in 1817. And he suggested that if a writer could infuse, these are his words, a writer could infuse human interest and semblance of truth into a fantastic tale, the reader would suspend judgment concerning the implausibility of the narrative. And in other words, the writing is so perfectly created as to make imaginary supernatural characters as being true. A more apt description of the world that we knew could not be found, and this is where the bounds of fantasy and reality, they become so blurred in the book that they become insignificant. Our Hadassah book group read this, and Bonnie did. Rarely has our group expressed such overwhelming love for a book, and we even shared some tearful moments. It is a great book. I'm going to talk a little bit about the author, and then I have one more screen, and then I'm going to get out of the screen share. Our author, Alice Hoffman, was born in New York City and grew up on Long Island. And after graduating from high school in 1969, she attended Adelphi, from which she received a BA, and then she got her MA at Stanford University, where she had a fellowship in creative writing. Her first novel, Property of, was written and published at the age of 21 while she was studying at Stanford. And since that remarkable beginning, Alice Hoffman has become one of our most distinguished novelists. And I know somebody in our group here has read some of her books, so I would love to know about those. Since that, she has published a total of 23 novels, 3 books of short fiction, 8 books for children and young adults. Hoffman's fiction has been informed by fairy tales, and the world that we knew is a dark and beautiful tale featuring magical, fantastic characters. So it was not surprising to open the book, and this was the first page we saw. Can you tell me the way then, and I will seek you, that I may surely be allowed to do? Yes, you may do that, said he, but there is no way thither. It lies east of the sun and west of the moon, and never would you find your way out of there. And those are from the tales of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. So I had to look it up. I had never heard of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. And this is from a Norwegian fairy tale. And it goes like this. A young girl, and you can see, I love these pictures. A young girl is offered by her family in marriage to a bear. She's not happy with her matrimonial state. So she fails a test that she tried to pass to get her out of the marriage. And she loses her husband to a witch. But in doing so, at that point, she realizes the bear who she married is a prince who was cursed. She knows that she loves him, and she overcomes all types of obstacles to regain him, which she does. The message of the fairy tale is clear. A passive woman becomes an active, resilient heroine. It makes a point to say that a person must mature and go through rites of passage before becoming fully human. Okay. I need to get this up. I was at, and Bonnie, you may remember this. This is for Purim, and Rabbi Danielle, who's a rabbi in the area, she was part of a program. And she said to everyone as she was trying to get the screen shares all set up, she said, there really needs to be a prayer for screen share. And I totally agree. So let me just get this. Okay. Make this smaller so I can see everybody. The story begins in 1941 in Berlin, where the Nazis have taken over the city. 12-year-old Leah Cohn's father, a doctor, has been murdered, and she herself has narrowly escaped being raped by a Nazi soldier. Her mother, Honey Cohn, and her grandmother, Baba Shi, know that they will soon be taken by the Nazis, and their only hope is that Leah will survive. Everyone is desperate. In Berlin, the newspapers print photographs of Jewish businessmen, lawyers, and professors with captions calling them animals. Hani tells us that was how evil spoke. It made its own corrupt sense. It swore that the good were evil and that the evil had come to save mankind. It brought up ancient fears and scattered them on the street like pearls. To fight what was wicked, magic and faith were needed. This is what one must turn to when there is no other option. So Hani knows that she must find a way somehow to smuggle her 12-year-old daughter Leah out of the city. To do this, she turns to a rabbi for help. Will he create one of these mystical features, the golem, to protect her daughter and escort her out of the country? His answer is no. Well, the answer is no. But his brilliant daughter, Eddie, who overhears the plea and who wants nothing more than to become a rabbi herself, has had through observing her father, learned how to craft a golem. And she does. Built of mud from the banks of the river Spree, Ava the golem, who Eddie creates, is anointed with Hani's tears and touched with Marta, Eddie's sister, menstrual blood, and brought to life through a recitation of the secret names of God. Hani asks one thing of the still unaware Ava. I beg you for one thing. Love her as if she were your own. Ava awakens. She takes on the identity of Leah's supposed older cousin. Ava has the ability to communicate birds and angels. She is tall, strong, and confident. She learns languages, including bird songs, in minutes because Hani's request and Eddie's command she would kill on Leah's behalf. Eddie, Marta, Leah, and Ava leave Berlin for France, but Eddie and Marta's false papers smudge and clearly show that they are fake. The sisters run into problems when they try to escape, and they are separated from Leah and Ava. Eddie on the run makes her way to Vichy territory and joins the French resistance, ready to break every commandment she has lived her life by as she seeks revenge against the Nazis. Leah and Ava, meanwhile, arrive in Paris at the home of Leah's mother's cousins. The cousins' family includes two sons, Victor and Julianne, and their parents. But when the Nazis occupy Paris and start rounding up Jews, as well as the boys, they all must run for their lives. The maid, Marianne, who is not Jewish and has a relationship with Victor, has already returned to her father's farm in southeastern France, near the Swiss border. She looks for purpose in her simple life and finds it in taking children across the mountains into Switzerland. That region of the farmhouse surrounding the towns will become a point of convergence for all of them. And we see that Leah and Julian rely on sympathetic villagers and on Ava and a heron to stay alive and connected. The important relationships become Julian and Leah, whose love develops through the 3 years that we're that we were talking about, Victor, his older brother, and Marianne, the maid, and Ava and the heron. It's important to see that this is a historical novel, as the author takes great care in historical accuracy. But then too, the world that we knew is a fantastic fable. Its central character is a creature who, as the author says, sees the world beyond men's eyes. To Ava, the author tells us angels and demons are visible. She speaks the language of birds and animals and insects. She is stronger than 100 horsemen, and she can tell the future. And she falls in love with a beautiful heron, nearly as tall as a man, who saw her for who she is, a creature like no other. As the novel would not exist without the character of Leah, I felt this is Ava's story, where as she experiences more and more, she exposes and explores the human condition. She questions, she's amazed by life, and we get to see and hear through her eyes what it's like to be an adult rather than a child, maturing from babyhood into the world. Ava is a golem. So what is a golem? And for those of you who may not know everything about one, I'm going to read a part here. Hani, who we remember, instigated this. She goes to her friend, and the friend actually recommends the golem. And Hani said, well, tell me what this is all about. Her friend went on to explain that this monstrous entity was made of earth, but imbued with life by God's allowance and man's practice. The golem was created by use of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, first mentioned in the book of Psalms. It has no soul, only ruach, the life and breath of animals. The Talmud stated that Adam himself was a golem until God gave him a soul, for a soul is said to be what divides us from all others. What good would such a thing as a golem be to me? Hani wanted to know. Have you no idea of what a golem can do? It can use the language of birds and of fish, tell time without a clock, and leap from the roof like a bat. It can see the future, commune with the dead, overcome demons. It can tell the day and hours of a person's death. It can speak to angels and live among them. It cannot be stopped from any act unless it is held 10 cubits above the ground, for at that height, it's powerless. Whoops. Sorry. Yeah, here. Interestingly, too, the golem can be made, it will be made in the image of the maker. Eddie was female, and so she made the golem a female. So Ava was created for Hani, with the hopes of her being a creature who could also care for her daughter, and a mother who would also. And she prayed over the golem, pouring a vial of her own tears, saying and praying, see as I see, do as I would have, be who I might have become. And Eddie, in her act of creating Ava, takes the reader on a really breathless ride as the golem comes to life. And once again, I'm going to read from the book. With a final effort that left her panting, Eddie opened the gates with her prayers. To her amazement, she saw the letters of the illuminated Hebrew alphabet hanging in midair. Before there were numbers, there were now letters, so ancient and intricate that they were used for both counting, and speech. Eddie's awe of the Almighty and his wonders intensified. She felt a web of power in the room. Beads of sweat formed on her burning lips as she continued her recitation. The incantation felt hot and sweet in her mouth. She seemed no longer attached to the ground. Everything was equal: earth, fire, water, and sky. The other women opened their minds as well. What we know, let's see if I can move this over. What we know of Ava's appearance is that she had gray eyes gray of stone, and a complexion to match. She had long, shiny, dark, curly hair, as the author writes, flowing down her back like a river. But we learn through the book that her features change with the situation. And Eddie, as she first took a look at her creation, she was amazed by how utterly human her creation appeared to be. The only shoes they could find, though, that would fit her were the large black boots belonging to the rabbi, their father. As Ava came alive, she could see the world beyond men's eyes. There were angels in the canopy of trees. She could call to the birds in a language that was too mysterious. And even though Ava sees clearly, more than others, the evil that men could be, she tells us later that if she initially had the freedom to speak her mind, she would have said, and quoting from the book, how green the verdant countryside was, how bright the light had become, how grateful she was to her maker each and every minute, how the birds in the treetops could be heard even when the train rumbled by, how the first of the season's bees hit against the window panes as if searching for flowers, how absolutely marvelous it was to be in the world. It was too beautiful for mortals to truly understand, although they would stop overwhelmed by its beauty. There were so many pivotal moments for Hannah to bring her creation to fullness. But the one that truly changed the trajectory of the story is Ava's meeting of a lone heron, nameless in the book, only referred to as the heron. And we saw a picture on the cover in the beginning. And we'd like to say things are beshert, but if there ever was truly a moment, it was this. And as I read, and you probably have picked it up already, the author's language, use of language, is to me astounding. It's so beautiful. Let me read how she meets the heron. Excuse me, I just need a drink. After a harrowing moment, when Leah and Julian were nearly accosted by 2 Nazi soldiers and Ava rescued them, Ava needed to go to a peaceful place. Oh, I'm sorry, I have it here, I'm reading. Ava left the soldiers in the doorway so no one would see. She felt called to the water and clay from which she'd become. She was exhausted. She wanted the cold current, and she wanted to wash off the deaths that just happened. There was the river, only steps away. For the first time, Ava wanted something for herself. That river, that water, that clay. So without thinking, she stripped off her dress, folded it on the bank, and then took off her boots. She went barefoot, quickening her pace, the mud between her toes. When she plunged in, the water was delicious and familiar, as if she had come home. But she saw a lone heron who stood at the edge of the water. Ava could tell this one was in mourning, for herons were always in pairs. His heron wife had been shot by a farmer who believed the flesh of a heron brought good fortune and courage. It was an old story fashioned out of a lie, but people believe lies if they're told often enough. In ancient Rome, the heron was the bird of divination. Its hollow bones tossed onto the floor would form an augury used to predict the future, and its bold call warned men of wars and famine. In Greece, the herons were messengers for the mortal and the gods. Herons were usually no more than 3 feet tall, but this one was as tall as a man. His plumes were ash gray, and his head was blue-black. His wings were ink and ash combined. A bird's heart is larger than a man's. It sees colors no human has ever seen. It can gather more light, hunt in the darkness, hear the wind on the other side of the city. This one saw Ava, for who she was, a creature like no other. The heron walked to her, and she to him, and this is how it began. Out of water, out of clay, out of air, when it was not expected, when it should never have happened, when no one else understood who she was. Okay. Earlier, or after this part, when the heron and Ava were together, Leah would lay awake at night to watch Ava dancing with the heron. Winter was closing in. He was staying later than he should. Sweeps the bird had left already for warmer climates, but every day he was there, and every night they danced. Leah watched entranced, well aware that she was seeing magic being made. Ava looked luminous as she danced barefoot, and sometimes she threw her head back and laughed with delight. And Leah thought, if a golem was made of clay, how was it possible for her to feel this? And the day that the heron knew he must leave, the mother superior at a convent where they were staying paused in the courtyard in the dim light of morning to listen to Ava sing to the heron in a voice that brought tears to her eyes. They danced in the courtyard, bowing and circling to one another, singing in the beautiful language of birds, in which heartbreak sounded like a song. Can everybody see me? Because I have it so that I can't see everybody. Is everybody okay? And I can't even, is that right? Okay. All right. The relationship between Ava and Leah was also highly instrumental in Ava's development as well as Leah's. As Ava and Leah were bound together by the circumstances and Hani's command that Ava protect her daughter, each other's growth was reflected in the other. Leah knew that Ava was special, but she resented Ava for not being her mother. And now she found that as time went on, she was strangely comforted by Ava's presence. She asked Ava to teach her how to talk to the birds. So they went to the garden so lessons could begin. They sat facing each other. Everything else dropped away. Everything changed between them. They were of one mind, and as they looked into each other's eyes, neither had the desire to look away. Think in blue, in green, in starlight, in song, in blessing, in beauty, in gratitude. Inside the convent, they could hear birdsong all through the dinner hour. Some of the girls began to cry. Others laughed out loud. The sisters remembered things that they had long forgotten from a time when they were young and filled with faith. And no one noticed that Leah was late to dinner. In time, Ava realized that she was experiencing emotions she wasn't to have. She worried over Leah in a profound way that caught her by surprise, acting not out of duty, but from someplace inside of her. Why this should be, she had no idea. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. One day she was so deep in thought, she didn't notice when she caught her finger on a thorn as she cleared away a twisted black branch. A single bead of blood formed, crimson in the early morning light. She stared at it, confused. Was she meant to have blood rather than water and clay? And I must tell you, I copied and pasted much of the book. So you probably can hear as I'm reading from the book to explain what I'm trying to show you. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. The themes of good and evil, the power of love, are certainly evident in this novel. But the overriding theme is for each character, Hani, Eddie, Leah, Victor, Julianne, and Ava, to answer the question, what does it mean to be fully human, to live an honorable life in these deplorable times? Each finds their own answer through courage, love, purpose, and a driving desire to stay alive. So right from the beginning, we face this theme. As Leah, in the beginning, still in a state of shock that she has to leave her mother and resentful of Ava, who is stepping in for her mother, she says goodbye to her mother and Babashi. Leah's Babashi whispered to Leah as she said her goodbyes, seeing her off to France. We cannot give up. We have to save the next generation so that one day you can rescue people as your father did. And we love you more than we love our own lives. As she continues, we meet the symbol of the wolf. We see the wolf throughout the book, and the wolf epitomizes this theme. So Babashi takes the last minute to tell Leah a story. And here it is. It was the middle of winter when the whole world was white and a wolf and her cub had been chased as far as they could. There was no escape, at least not for both. When the mother wolf ran to attack the hunters, all they saw were her claws and her fangs. While they shot her, the cub disappeared into the snow. That was the moment when the cub's coat turned white, from black to white, so that it was forever invisible to hunters. This is the way a mother triumphs, Babashi said. All you have to do is survive, and your mother lives through you. And Babashi then finished with a harder truth. The wolf turned white in the snow. It managed to live, but it went on alone. Another character, Marianne, who I discussed earlier, was having a love relationship with Victor. They are not together at this point. They are at her home. She has left the home where she was working because the Nazis were coming, and she ran home to be with her father. Her father was a man who was willing to try to do what was right. He had always tried to do God's will and act with faith. And now it seemed his daughter was the same. He was filled with a raw pride. Guiding people across the border was dangerous. This is what she had chosen to do. Several people have been detained at a crossing place known as the Plain de Loup, the Wolf's Plain. As you can see, the wolf appears again. If Marianne were apprehended, she would be on her own. He gazed at her and he thought, are you sure you want to help the pastor doing this? Oh, yes, she said. She had always wished to accomplish something. And as it turned out, this is what she had been waiting for all along. So another thing was simply, I need water in my throat. Excuse me. Another theme was simply stay alive. The author connects these stories between these characters amazingly with just these two words. 21 times I counted. I went on Kindle and did a search for stay alive. 21 times we hear it. We hear it for the first time when Julian makes the decision to stay with his parents rather than run away from the Nazis, run away with Ava and Leah. Leah. Leah then told him, okay, he can stay, but there was only one thing he had to do. And then they would surely see each other again. Stay alive, she told him. 21 times through voice and even through the notes that our special heron carried back and forth between Leah and Julian. One day, Julian sees this heron. He had no idea who the heron was. And he sees a note tied to the heron's leg. He goes up and he takes it off. And the note says, I am fine. No one else knows me as well as you do. Stay alive. And then at one point, when Julian escapes and finds himself floating in freezing water, he wondered why he was still alive. He was feeling guilty. He had managed to work himself out of so many amazing consequences and not been murdered by the Nazis. He wondered why he was still alive, feeling guilty and weak because others had not been able to. Stay alive, he heard Leah's voice clearly in his head. He remembered it was his promise to her. And finally, to carry the theme, we hear the voice of Hani, Leah's mother, who we presume had been murdered by the Nazis. But we hear her voice in a hauntingly beautiful voice. And her voice is always written in italics throughout the novel, guiding and encouraging her daughter to stay strong and stay alive. For example, early on, when Leah still was afraid and unaware of what and who Ava was, she had just met her, and resentful that Ava was taking her mother's place, Leah hears her mother's voice in her head, in her mind. Don't worry about who she is. Know she will always protect you. That is all I want, all I ever want. And as the years went by, Leah realized how much she needed Ava. Feelings that replaced the old resentments. But Leah felt uncomfortable with these new feelings. She hears in her voice, in her mind, her mother's voice. She will follow you to the ends of the earth. When she looks at you, I will see you. When she embraces you, I will feel your heartbeat. You can love her if you want. It's not a betrayal. Because when you do, I will be there with you. I am so sorry. I feel so ridiculous, but I get all emotional at this. So I apologize. So bear with me here. Okay. All right. So the most harrowing moment of this. Early on the train from Berlin to Paris, the three girls and Ava leave on a train to France with falsified papers. And this is Eddie and Marta's papers were smudged from the cheap ink of their own forged paper. Pretending to be sick, the two sisters were directed to the back of the train. And then there was no other way. When they leapt from the train, they felt a rush of cool air. They could not go backward now. The sisters held each other's hands as they jumped. The grass was even taller here, and for a moment they were startled as they landed in a pool of mud. There were gnats in the air, and swallows rose and fell in the sky. Eddie helped her sister to her feet, and they ran. It was like flying as a blaze of grass hit against them. They heard shouts from the rear of the train. They were commanded to halt. It was a rough voice shouting from a distance, but when you are flying, you can't stop. You don't dare. Eddie ran so fast she feared her heart would burst. She could hear her sister right behind her, breathing hard, so hard. It seemed as if she were crying. Eddie wished for the east wind as they ran from the train. If only they could rise into the air and not come down until they reached Paris. A few more steps was all it would take. The forest was before them, a dark bower of pines. They simply needed to keep their eyes open and not look back. They must run, say farewell to everything they had ever known. They were racing so fast, they lifted into the blue air. It was a miracle. It was more than anyone could ask for. They were nearly to the woods, and the horizon shimmered. France was in the distance, in that pale horizon. And then it happened. So that's where I'm going to end this today. And I hope that this last scene encourages you to read it. It is a fantastic novel. And early on, we heard Hani say that rationality alone cannot fight wickedness. Magic and faith were needed. You'll realize after reading this novel that that belief was truly realized here. Thank you.
Oh, Jill, thank you so very much. I'm going to really open it up if anybody wants to add any comments or ask any questions. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and do so. Do I see any hands? I don't know if anyone else has a question, but I think it's very unusual that we have a female golem. I have never heard of a female golem in any books I have read. Wondered if you had any comment about that. And you're muted, Jill.
I think it was, it seemed to be something they really wanted to do. They were all women. And Hani needed this for her daughter. She may have felt more comfortable. Actually, I think she said she would, okay? And whoever read this before, correct me if I'm wrong. But, and then they did pour the tears and the menstrual blood to make sure she was a female. So it was interesting. And and I know Sophie has raised her hand, so I'll be with you in a minute. If you ever read the Golem and the Genie, anybody here have read that? Another fabulous book. The Golem is a female again in there. So if you remember that, I don't know, it makes it a better book, I think, if it's a female. Sophia.
Yes, I read about 4 or 5 of her books, and each time I loved it. This is a little bit different because I am not into fairy tales, dancing herons, and golems, and so on. But the way she writes, the way she describes, and I know you were trying very hard, and it is very difficult to describe. It's like reading poetry, even if you don't like poetry. Her language is so beautiful that it just feels like you are, even sometimes you read because you wanted to read for something. It is something that you enjoy, and it is, something like this. Now, I wrote a little but what I feel about the book because it just made me feel more comfortable. So it would take about a minute or so. It's just a couple of words. Okay. I love Alice Hoffman books. I hate her magic stories, as this book of the golem, the dancing heron, the angel of death. They are all portrayed as a man. She uses magical images in all of her books that I read so far. I love her rich description, and it is like poetry of colors, hues, and symbolism, superstition, the way of life. Everything is kind of put together. Her stories are told against a rich backdrop of myths and fairy tales. The language that she uses builds the sentences that make her book magically beautiful. And I like myself realism, but the way she builds her sentences, the mix of fantasy and historical facts, it is associated with her as magical realism. And that's what they described that, the critics described her book. She is a lover of Kafka, and his name is mentioned in that book too. And if you kind of go into it, he also used a lot of magical realism. She uses his literature interpretation, and as he did in his work, that fuse elements and realism and fantasy. And I hope you guys understood me. As you can hear, English is not my first language, but I love the language and I love to express myself. That's it.
I totally agree. I was just, sometimes what you're reading just strikes you, and you have to read it again and again because of the beauty of it. That's what I found. There was, if anybody has read Where the Crawdads Sing, has anybody read that? Mm-hmm. That author, I can't remember her name, that author also has a really incredible way of putting words together. But this one, like Sophia said, with the colors, and you just could see the intensity of what she was talking about. It was
right. Okay.
Sally, I saw your hand up.
Me?
Sally.
So, yeah, Jill, thank you for such an inspiring review. I have read quite a few of Alice Hoffman's books, but not this one yet, but I think you've encouraged me to do so. And you brought out a lot of good points, including her use of suspended belief and use of beautiful language, which I love, because I am a poet too. Oh. And also, I would like to say in New York, when I was teaching way back when, we started a book club, the teachers I worked with back in about 1989. And our first book was Turtle Moon. Turtle Moon was one of Alice Hoffman's first book. Oh. And that was, I don't know if it's available, but it just was so moving that, so then we started to read more of Alice Hoffman and also other authors, but she was our starting point, and her starting book at that time was called Turtle Moon.
Oh, Turtle Moon.
Yes, it's an old book, you know.
I read it down. I have to find it.
Who read it? Who said they read it? You did?
No, Jill? No, I did not. I wrote it down so I would read it.
Yeah, see if you can find it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Karen, I think you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I am also, Sophia and I like the same books, and I'm not into magic, but I absolutely read Alice Hoffman as soon as the books come out. And I wanted to, one of the first Zoom things I ever did after COVID, she actually did a Zoom session with her cousin, who is Lisa Hoffman, who was the manager of a yarn store in New York that has since closed. But the book is called Fairy Knitting. And Alice writes a whole bunch of things about different fairy tales. And then her cousin does the knitting patterns. So it's Fairy Knitting, spelled F-A-E-R-I-E. And it's really worth reading. It's a neat book.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, who's going to read it? I got one.
Any other questions? Oh, Anita, just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Myself. I just was going to make a comment. Jill, you just brought out, I mean, as you were tearing up, I was tearing up as you were reading the portions from the book, and I was remembering. And what I really enjoyed a lot about this book is that it seems of late, and I don't know if it's been since the pandemic than ever, but it seems there are more and more books about the Holocaust. And you find yourself going down this kind of deep, very depressing, you know, there is some hope. But the difference between this book and other ones that I read was just so startling. And the fact of bringing together, and I used to read a lot of fantasy, and I haven't read fantasy in a really long time. Historical fiction seems to be my favorite genre of books these days. But I just loved that, and where it brought in the imagery and where it brought in the magic in such a horrific time. And I just found the book just incredible. And I would definitely recommend it for people that they haven't read it yet. I have a very, very tight schedule for today, but I made time to come to this today because I wanted to hear what you had to say about the book. And thank you so much. Your words were very inspiring.
Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. I feel the same way. I used to read a lot of science fiction and but not a lot of fantasy. We just had it on our book group list, and I thought, oh God, you know, what is this? I was just so smitten with it right from the beginning, and you can't put it down. It's amazing.
That's great. Well, I am going to thank you once again, and remind you that next Tuesday, Sally, who just spoke just a couple of minutes ago, Sally Walkenstein, is going to be reviewing The Bridge Ladies by Betsy Lerner. And we're in once more for a great treat. And I look forward to seeing everybody else next week.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.